more beautiful on the outside and save money too. As an energy-conscious consumer, I fully endorse ABC Seamless Siding. Call today. They will show you how cost-effective ABC Seamless really is.
This is CNN.
President Bush falls ill in Japan, slumps to the floor, aides blame intestinal flu. Welcome to NewsHour. I'm Reid Collins in Washington.
And I'm Bobbie Battista in Atlanta. President Bush is resting comfortably now after collapsing during a dinner in Tokyo. The White House says he has the stomach flu. Mr. Bush had to cancel a breakfast session with U.S. and Japanese business leaders because of the sudden bout with illness. CNN's Mary Tillotson is traveling with the president and has this report.
After 9 frenzied days on the road from Sydney to Osaka, President Bush grew nauseated, vomited, and collapsed in his chair Wednesday night at a Tokyo dinner party hosted by Japanese Prime Minister Miyazawa. The president was examined on the spot by his personal doctor, Burton Lee. Lee's diagnosis, an attack of intestinal flu, not a recurrence of the heart problem that Mr. Bush experienced early last year because of his thyroid condition. A melee erupted as Japanese security guards tried to prevent American reporters from seeing Mr. Bush abruptly leave the dinner.
Are you all right, Mr. Bush?
Come on.
What happened, sir? What happened, Mr. Bush?
Though he looked drawn and disheveled, the president told reporters he felt good. As the motorcade raced through Tokyo carrying Mr. Bush back to his guest quarters at Akasaka Palace, Prime Minister Miyazawa read a note to his guests about the departed guest of honor. Presidential spokesman Marlin Fitzwater told reporters Mr. Bush was given medicine to calm his nausea, then put to bed for the night, with no special monitoring of his condition.
Nothing extraordinary that Dr. Lee does not feel there's any special monitoring required. All aspects of the examination indicate that it is a common case of the flu.
Mrs. Bush, who stayed at the dinner, made light of the president's illness and hasty exit.
But I'm beginning to think it's the ambassador's fault. He and George played the Emperor and the Crown Prince in tennis today, and they were badly beaten.
When Fitzwater was asked if being felled by the flu might persuade Mr. Bush to slow down, he said, nope, the president likes staying busy. Mr. Bush will skip an early morning breakfast meeting Thursday, but otherwise, says Fitzwater, he'll stick to his schedule the rest of this trip. Mary Tillotson, CNN, Tokyo.
Now joining us live again from Tokyo and with more on the story is CNN's Taylor Henry. Taylor?
Reid, it's 2 o'clock in the morning here in Tokyo, and I'm standing in front of the Akasaka Guest Palace where Mr. Bush is sleeping soundly, we're told, and in good shape. It was nearly 6 hours ago that he collapsed a short distance from here, about a 10-minute drive under ordinary circumstances. The president was driven by car back here to Akasaka Guest Palace, and after an examination by his doctor, pronounced in good shape. An ambulance was standing by outside the Prime Minister's official residence where the president collapsed tonight. The ambulance was not used. Presumably, it was ready to take Mr. Bush several blocks from where we stand now to the Keio University Hospital. However, that was not necessary. Mrs. Bush stayed behind at the dinner and arrived here at the guest house about 45 minutes after the president. And after that, there were 2 other cars that showed up here, one believed carrying a senior Japanese government official. Those cars left shortly thereafter. A crowd of reporters and news cameramen has been standing vigil here for the last nearly 6 hours. That crowd has dwindled considerably now, down to about 24, mostly Japanese cameramen standing by just in case anything unusual develops. However, there has been nothing out of the ordinary here tonight. The windows of the guest house are all lit up. Obviously, staff keeping watch tonight, but we're told that the president is sleeping now and in good shape. Taylor Henry, CNN, reporting live from Tokyo.
All right, as we know, part of the government goes with the president where he travels, but a little part stays here in Washington. CNN's Carl Rochelle. Carl?
Reid, the part that was staying here is now airborne and on the way to New Hampshire, and we're referring, of course, to Vice President Dan Quayle. He left here a little before 11 this morning. We expect him to be on the ground in New Hampshire and to hold a news conference up there about 12:30 today. The Vice President is going to go 2 days of campaigning in New Hampshire. That was what he had scheduled. That was what he had planned. Now, we did see the Vice President a little earlier this morning when he left from his primary office in the Executive Office building and walked over to the White House. Reporters threw questions.
How's the president?
Well, if you notice very carefully, as the Vice President, just as he disappeared down by the bushes, he gave a thumbs up. How is the President? Okay, was the thumbs up sign. There were a couple of questions that were thrown to him. One, had he talked with the President? And he did not answer that, and we're not able yet to determine from the Vice President's office whether he has in fact had a conversation with the President. We do know that he got the word about 6:30 Eastern time this morning. That was apparently within a half hour, an hour or so above the time the President did collapse. The word came to the White House, to Samuel Skinner, the President's Chief of Staff, from Samuel Skinner to the Vice President. Samuel Skinner came on down to the White House where he began to conduct business, but we are told that the Vice President came here about his normal time, perhaps even a few minutes later. They are going to great pains here at the White House to make things appear to be normal, that everything is running A-OK. Carl Rochelle, CNN, reporting live from the White House.
Well, as Carl said, Vice President Dan Quayle seems determined today to keep a low profile and go about business as usual. But another former vice president says he's sure that Mr. Quayle has a lot on his mind. Richard Nixon was vice president under President Eisenhower, and he remembers when Mr. Eisenhower suffered a heart attack, a stroke, and a serious illness while in office. CNN's Larry King interviewed Mr. Nixon earlier today.
For a vice president, you don't think about, well, gee, I'm going to be president pretty soon, or I may be, and what am I going to do? But you really think about, we just hope that the president gets well. You're concerned about, that's the way I felt at least.
You don't get any thought that it could be you?
Not at that point. Later on, you can be sure that as the media descends on you and as the political people descend on you, in fact, you can be sure at that time, the moment President Eisenhower had a heart attack, I heard from people that I had never heard for before. And once he got well, I didn't hear from him again. That's the way it goes.
The full interview with former President Nixon appears on Larry King Live tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern.
And just ahead on NewsHour, we'll get a closer look at the president's medical condition, a close-up look at the Wall Street condition, too. We'll talk with a physician, and we'll go to Wall Street Live.
AT&T is constantly searching for new ways to help our customers save money on long distance.
Forecasts, look at profiles, we do comparisons.
And what we've recently discovered is remarkably simple.
He just got the airline tickets, so...
Those customers who spend over $11 a month on out-of-state long distance could start saving right away by signing up for one of the AT&T Reach Out America plans. If you spend over $11 a month, you could save on long distance, too. All it takes is one call to 1-800-422-3000.
AT&T, this is Terry. How can I help you?
Hi, Terry. I was wondering if you could help us save some money on our long-distance calls.
This is about people. We have to put ourselves in the customer's place.
Why don't you tell me a little about the way you use long distance?
Well, we make long-distance calls all day long.
You'll learn how you could save 24 hours a day. 25% on calls made after 5 p.m.
I say 25% is a pretty good chunk.
And on some plans, enjoy a daytime discount.
I guess you can say we're pretty good customers.
Who are you talking to?
Carrie, would you mind repeating that?
Not at all.
Reach Out America makes saving money simple by helping you save when you call without changing the way
You want to pick up the phone and be able to call your relatives, your loved ones, and not think how much it's going to cost you.
You can save 24 hours a day. There's a 25% discount in the evenings and a daytime discount as well.
My husband has a sister in Madrid that he calls sometimes.
That's perfect. We offer a discount on calls all over. No problem. You can save on calls wherever you are.
If you spend over $11 a month on long distance, there's a Reach Out America plan that can help you
Do you really think
So call us now at 1-800-422-3000.
Good enough for me.
Thank you for calling AT&T.
Honey, that sounded pretty good. Why don't we sign up?
We just did.
Great. Who do we call?
Call AT&T and find out how one of the Reach Out America plans could help you save.
The president's illness today has had some effect on the stock exchange. Bill Hartley joins us now to tell us where things are at. Bill?
Bobbie, the president's illness did not have a terribly measurable impact on the market. The market did open down, to be sure, but in fact that had been expected. After all, the overseas markets were up quite sharply today, and traders and investors have been expected to take profits from several days of run-up. But right now, the Dow has turned totally around. The market up sharply. It is up by almost over 14 points right now. And volume very heavy. The broader market also moving ahead, so we could be well on our way to the 8th record out of 9 sessions. Live at the New York Stock Exchange, I'm Bill Hartley.
Medical experts say President Bush's collapse is not related to heart and thyroid problems he suffered last year. Mr. Bush was hospitalized last spring after he experienced an irregular heartbeat while jogging. That problem was traced to a thyroid condition. After treatments, the president's doctors gave him a clean bill of health, but he is still taking some hormone medication and blood thinners. The White House and Japanese Foreign Ministry both deny that President Bush was stricken with food poisoning, as some reports indicated. Before his collapse today, the president told reporters that he had had some trouble sleeping because of jet lag and had taken half of a Halcyon pill, which is a sleeping aid.
The question occurs, what kind of immediate responses are called for in a case such as the president's? Dr. Yolanda Haywood is an emergency medicine specialist at George Washington University Medical Center here in Washington, and she joins us now live. Doctor, if you're the president's physician and you find that he has suddenly collapsed or slumped over, as they put it, in his chair, what do you do first? Where do you check?
The first thing to do is to make sure that the president is breathing, that he has a pulse. Once you do that, you would check his vital signs and go from there.
All right, if you know, as Dr. Burton Lee did know, that the president had not been feeling too sharp before then, does this guide your diagnosis if you're at a dinner table?
It certainly would lead you to suspect that there may be a problem with a viral illness, some infectious problem, dehydration. Those are the things that would probably you would start to think of initially.
All right. What is there about the gastroenteritis, the disturbance of the long gut, that seems to affect our heads, our capacity to function?
Well, the problem with gastroenteritis is that you tend to collect fluid in the gastrointestinal tract. That causes your blood pressure to be low. When your blood pressure is low, you don't get enough blood to your brain, you don't get enough oxygen to your brain, you can pass out or faint. Once you're lying on the floor, you don't need as high a blood pressure, and you tend to wake up once you're laying flat.
All right. Now, Mr. Bush, when he awakened and was propped up, seemed to look awfully ashen, pale, and very, very ill, at least to the layman who's watched it. What is this? Is this just PBF, post-barf pallor, or what is it?
It's a common observation that when your blood pressure is low, you shunt all your blood away from your skin into the areas that are more important, such as your brain and your heart. So once you lose the blood flow to your skin, it turns very pale.
All right. Is the president, for a 67-year-old man, and I realize you can't make an 11,000-mile diagnosis, perhaps pressing himself a bit?
I think that from all I know of the president, he's in top-flight condition. I wouldn't think that if he's healthy and doesn't have an illness such as a gastroenteritis or some kind of flu, he's not pressing himself. On the other hand, if he has an underlying illness, even though it may be a very limited illness, you certainly need rest in bed and plenty of fluids, the common doctor's advice.
All right. Historically, his doctors, when President Eisenhower was allowed to walk out of the White House when he had had a slight heart attack, came in for a tremendous drubbing by the medical profession. Would you, as a physician, allow a person to stand up and walk about had you any suspicion it was the heart?
Absolutely not.
Very good. Thank you, doctor. We appreciate your diagnosis and your expertise of a situation which we should add is many thousands of miles and virtually light years away, but the president is resting. Well, is politics at rest? We'll talk to a political expert and analyst right after this as to the possible prognosis for politics vis-a-vis Mr. Bush.
They say diversify to reduce risk, but I'm no financial expert.
I know how to build a house, not a portfolio.
How do you judge each investment? When to buy or sell?
And who has time to follow the market?
Because most people can't be masters at everything, Fidelity Investments created the Fidelity Asset Manager. In one easy mutual fund, it seeks to diversify among and across stocks, bonds, and money markets. And Fidelity professionals carefully watch your investment for you, gradually adjusting your assets to keep pace with changes in the market.
It's designed for those of us who aren't financial experts.
Call now for this free fact kit on the Fidelity Asset Manager.
I called. You should too. There's no pressure to invest. There's no sales charge either. All your money works for you.
Diversification made simple. Call 1-800-356-8100 for your free fact kit. Fidelity Investments. Common sense, uncommon results. Share price, yield, and return will vary.
It's gone. But it isn't.
Introducing an incredible Vicks cough drop like you've never known before.
It's gone, but it's still working.
A cough drop so powerful, it keeps on working even after it's gone.
It's still working.
All new Extra Strength Vicks. Extra strength with twice the Vicks vapor medicine to relieve your cough and help your scratchy throat and stuffy nose feel better. So try new Extra Strength Vicks. Extra strong to work even after the drop is gone.
It's still working.
I'm Jane Fonda. Join me on TNT for a personal look at my father, Henry Fonda.
Fonda on Fonda, the life and the career of Henry Fonda, hosted by Jane Fonda. Monday, followed by Henry Fonda in The Grapes of Wrath.
Well, of course, every presidential action prompts reaction in the political world particularly. To help sort this out, joining us now here in Washington is William Schneider, CNN analyst and political scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Bill?
Well, you know, when this happened in the past, and it's happened again, unfortunately, in Japan, it always brings one issue front and center, and that is the role of Dan Quayle. We've been monitoring the image of Dan Quayle. In our latest poll, the CNN Gallup poll conducted just this week, what we found is that Americans have a majority unfavorable opinion of Dan Quayle. It's about 5-4, 51% unfavorable, 41% favorable. Will this have an impact on the election if Bush keeps Quayle on the ticket? Well, what we did was we looked at people who said that they voted for George Bush in 1988, and 1/3 of the people who voted for Bush have an unfavorable opinion of Quayle, which means that 1/3 of the voters could be at risk in this election if Bush keeps Quayle on the ticket. I think it's going to reintroduce the Quayle issue. It's going to be an issue in the campaign. People are going to say, do you really want to take the chance of making Dan Quayle president? Back in November, in a CNN Gallup poll, we asked people, do you think Dan Quayle is qualified to take over as president if something should happen to George Bush? And there the answer was even stronger. By 53 to 37%, Americans said no. They don't think Dan Quayle is qualified to be president. So I think we're going to see a lot of discussion and debate in this campaign about whether Bush should keep Quayle on the ticket. He's going to be an issue in the center of this whole debate. It's going to be an undeniable problem for the president, especially if this is, as it's likely to be, a close election. One other question we asked in this week's poll, we asked registered voters, would you be more likely or less likely to vote for George Bush for president if he kept Quayle on the ticket as his vice presidential running mate? Now, among all registered voters, 11% said more likely, 19% said less likely, and about 2/3 said it really wouldn't make a great deal of difference. We then looked at the critical group of swing voters, the independents. They amount to 35% of the voters. They are people who normally decide the outcome of elections in this country. Among those, the responses were just about the same. 11% of independents said they'd be more likely to vote for Bush, but twice as many, 23%, said they'd be less likely to vote for Bush if he kept Quayle on the ticket. That's a 12% negative margin. If you do the calculations, you discover that that means there's a 4% net loss to the president among independents if he keeps Quayle on the ticket. Now that's more than enough to decide the vote in a close election. So it's a kind of risk for the president to keep him on the ticket because a lot of Americans are going to be wondering, if I vote to re-elect George Bush, am I voting for Dan Quayle? And there's no evidence in any of the polling data that Quayle's image has turned around as of now.
Bill, how much of this depends truly on the seriousness of the president's condition, however?
Well, obviously, if the president's condition isn't terribly serious, then the issue will be somewhat muted. But I think people know that he's 68 years old. He's had some minor health problems. This could be another minor health problem. You know, I once approached an insurance actuary and asked him to calculate the sheer odds of the president's survivability through the end of a second term. And before this particular incident, it was after the earlier incident with the heart murmur and the Graves' disease, the calculation was that there's about 1 chance in 8 that a man of George Bush's age and physical condition would not last through 1996. Now, that's an interesting point, because Americans need to ask the question, you know, is that a chance they want to take? There's 1 chance in 8 that Dan Quayle could become president of the United States within the next 5 years if George Bush is reelected and keeps Quayle on the ticket. I think this is going to be a serious issue, because these incidents, every time they happen, the question becomes more important.
As you know, there is a long exposition being run serially now in the Washington Post about Dan Quayle, how he came to be the vice president and his function in the vice presidency. Is this having any effect, and if so, what?
Well, it is, of course, introducing a lot more debate about Dan Quayle. The report in the Washington Post, which is just appearing this week, is rather mixed. It has some revelations about Quayle, his rather poor relationship with Secretary of State James Baker, the difficulty he had when he first came into the campaign. He wasn't prepared to cope with all the publicity. He made some mistakes. I'd say, on the whole, it's not likely to change many impressions of Quayle. It gives a great deal of wealth of detail about Quayle's background. But I don't think it's going to change many minds about Dan Quayle. We'll wait to see if people read that, if it gets into the news, if the polling data pick that up. You know, one of the interesting points about that series is that Quayle has had a fairly strained relationship with Secretary of State Baker. He was then an advisor, chairman of the Bush campaign in 1988. If something should happen to George Bush, if he were incapacitated for any period of time, I think an awful lot of Republicans and Americans generally would probably look to James Baker as the kind of symbol of continuity. He's had tremendous amount of experience in the Reagan White House. He was Secretary of the Treasury, so he knows domestic policy. He's now Secretary of State. He knows foreign policy. If George Bush were in any way seriously incapacitated, I can see a real split in the Republican Party between but 2 factions of the party, Dan Quayle, who would be acting president, and James Baker, who is Bush's, more or less his heir as a political figure.
All right, William Schneider, thank you.
Sure.
Bobbie?
In medical news now, researchers in St. Louis have found that exercise may help ward off serious diseases commonly associated with aging. CNN's Dan Rutz reports.
Silver hair and golden years do not make people immune from sweat. And researchers at Washington University in St. Louis find age makes no difference in how the body adapts to strenuous exercise.
We know if we put a young adult through a vigorous endurance exercise training program, within 2 to 3 months, we can improve their cardiovascular function about 25%.
Exercise physiology. 60 to 70-year-old people can gain that same 25% improvement in the efficiency of their hearts without endangering themselves, provided the workout routine is sensibly structured.
So we find that if you start them out a little more gradually and gradually build up, within about 3 or 4 months, they're able to exercise at the same relative intensities as a young person and reap the same benefits.
Participants help researchers studying a number of disorders like diabetes, high blood pressure, and osteoporosis. They're finding diseases commonly blamed on aging might actually be due to too much easy living.
And if we study master athletes, we find that they do not develop those disorders.
Marion Worth has no ambition to become a master athlete, but she enjoys feeling younger than her 68 years.
It's not real easy, but that's what it takes, you know, to stress the bones and get the heart rate up.
Research shows exercise increases the sensitivity of insulin to muscle. That helps keep diabetes under control with less medicine. Improved heart and lung capacity may prevent heart attacks or improve the chances of surviving them. And strenuous workouts maintain stronger bones for both men and women. These people are helping researchers find out exactly which exercises work best.
And actually, I prefer to maybe refer to it as impact versus non-impact exercise to see if it is that impact nature that stimulates bone growth, or if it's the muscles pulling on the bones that actually bring about some bone formation.
The participants are enthused because they have fun here and are under careful medical supervision. Doctors stress in order to enjoy the benefits without the risk, a checkup before the workout is a must. Dan Rutz, CNN, St. Louis.
News from Madison is brought to you by Bristol-Myers Squibb Company, makers of Theragran M, high-potency multivitamins with minerals.
Theragran wants to know. Changed my life.
Not much.
With Theragran M, multivitamins with minerals, fine-tuned for the way you live.
Tonight, former President Richard Nixon talks about the end of the Cold War, the controversy over JFK, the upcoming presidential race, and more. Richard Nixon tonight on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Across the world, phones are ringing. Who's calling?
Hello, Mom.
People who have the AT&T Reach Out World plan. They're saving an average of 20% on calls to friends and family in over 50 countries and areas. Even if you spend only $12 a month on international calls, you'll save on your calls to Mexico, Canada, across the Atlantic, or the Pacific. Dial 1-800-258-3231. Then go ahead and call, and the longer you talk, the more you'll save. The low $3 monthly fee gives you over 120 hours a week to save. You'll even get a state-to-state discount. Across America, people are signing up for the AT&T Reach Out World plan. Because with these savings and all the quality and service you expect from AT&T, it's our best value in international calling. Sign up now.
Fairchild's calling from the floor.
Today's business is a high-stakes game. CNN Business News gives you the edge with live reports from Wall Street and the day's business wrap-up every evening on Moneyline. The best business news in the business is on CNN.
The Palestinian representatives are en route to Washington now for another round of the Middle East peace talks. Delegates left Jerusalem earlier today for Amman, Jordan, where they're to meet up with the Jordanian half of what is a joint delegation. The team's expected in Washington tomorrow. Talks were scheduled to have begun today, but the Palestinians postponed their departure in protest to Israel's decision to deport those 12 Palestinians from the occupied territories. And today, in the occupied Gaza Strip, Israeli forces used tear gas and gunfire in breaking up a group of protesting the deportation. One Palestinian reportedly was killed in this, and 20 others were wounded.
Federal safety inspectors are trying to figure out why an engine fell off a Delta 737 jet. The plane lost its right engine as it took off from Dallas-Fort Worth yesterday, but it landed safely within minutes. A Delta spokesman said the engine on the Boeing 737 is designed to separate from the plane in the event of a malfunction. Twice before in the last 5 years, engines have fallen off Boeing 737s, and investigators blamed cracked bolts. There were no injuries among passengers and crew on board the Delta plane yesterday.
It was really wild because nobody had really known the thing fell off. I looked at the guy in front of me and I said to him, "Did you see what I just saw?" And he just acknowledged with the head nod, and I turned to the guy next to me and I said, "The engine just fell off the plane." And he goes, "No." He goes, "That's the wheels guy." I said, "Partner, the engine just fell off the plane."
I've had this happen once before, so I knew that you can fly these craft, on one engine, so I wasn't too concerned.
The pilot came on and said that we'd lost power in the engine. Boy, did we. And that we were going to return to the airport.
Just praise the Lord. He's not done with me yet.
All but 2 of the passengers continue their travels on other flights.
Courthouse janitor in Milwaukee has lost his job after he leaked a confidential report about the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer to the New York Times. 29-year-old Stephen Sessions says he made a stupid mistake, that's his words for it, when he gave the Times correspondent the so-called Dahmer report that contained Dahmer's confessions to murder. Sessions says he found the document while he was cleaning the prosecutor's office and then was persuaded by the Times reporter it shouldn't be kept secret. Dahmer is to go on trial in some 3 weeks. He faces 15 counts of murder. In Cleveland, a gunman who killed his estranged wife and her brother in a courthouse office is now listed in stable condition after being shot by a sheriff's deputy. Officials say